You may know that the Vikings beat Columbus to America, but did you know Columbus wasn't the second, but the third European to reach North America? You may have heard the 13th Amendment ended slavery, but did you know it is still legal and practiced in the United States? You may have a favorite dinosaur, but did you know none of these are dinosaurs? Learn the truth behind these and much more in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description. Humans are obsessive categorizers. We come up with rules and definitions to decide what goes into one category and what belongs into another. And most of the time, this works. It helps us understand the world. But every now and then, something breaks the rules so thoroughly that it really reminds us that the rules are completely made up. They're convenient, but by no means absolute. This video today is about trees. But before we talk about trees, let's talk about moons. You've probably heard that Jupiter, for example, has over 70 moons. And if you Google how many moons does Saturn have, you get a pretty similar number. But you could easily argue that Saturn has hundreds of millions, maybe even trillions. Why don't we count the fragments that are in Saturn's ring system as individual moons? Now, you might be thinking, don't be ridiculous, those things are tiny. Moons are round, right? But that is not always true. Sure, our moon is round, Jupiter's 4 biggest moons are round, Saturn's biggest moon, Titan, is a round moon, but many, in fact, the vast majority, are potato-shaped. They don't look like what you think a moon is. In fact, these are just asteroids, for the most part only a couple hundred meters or a couple of kilometers across. So if a 100-meter wide asteroid can count as a moon, then why not a 10-meter one? Why not a 1-meter one? Why not the particles in Saturn's rings? See where I'm going? What this shows is there's no clear objective definition of what a moon is, at least not one that distinguishes our moon from most other moons. Definitions for words, that's easy. Definitions for things, those are not. Defining an object sometimes means distilling it to its essential features, identifying the bare minimum characteristics that something needs to be what that term is. So then, what is a tree? Well, the way we describe trees, or the characteristics we say trees normally have, is they have wood, a single trunk, and specialized tissue like bark and heartwood. So for example, shrubs, they have woody stems, but because they have multiple trunks coming off of a single base, and because shrubs aren't very tall, we don't classify them as trees. But then there's a tree like Salix herbaceae, the dwarf willow. It grows to a maximum height of just 6 centimeters tall, but it has a single woody trunk and belongs in the willow genus. So, isn't it a tree? Or take palm trees. They're tall, they have a single trunk, but palm trees don't have wood or bark. Instead, palm wood is a completely different kind of fibrous material, and palms grow in a completely different way than typical trees do. You may have a cutting board or some shelves or furniture in your house made of bamboo, and bamboo produces something that is very much like wood, but again, it's not technically the same thing. Bamboo is a type of grass. Or let's take the quaking aspen. Aspens are trees, right? Well, the quaking aspen grows multiple trunks out of an underground root system that just spreads as far as it can under the ground. So we have height, made of wood, having a single trunk, bark. No matter which rule we pick to say these are the things that make something a tree, there's always an exception. There are always things that we say are trees that are lacking one or more of those things. But maybe real trees exist. It's just that some things, like palm trees, are just convincing imposters. This is where convergent evolution comes in. Convergent evolution is a process where different species independently evolve very similar traits or body plans. This happens not because the organisms share a recent common ancestor, but because they live in similar environments and independently evolve similar traits. So for example, porcupines, hedgehogs, tenrecs, and echidnas, they all have spikes, but they're very distantly related. They evolved their spikes independently. Their similarity betrays their actual relatedness. So in other words, we could say something like, a hedgehog is a false porcupine. So maybe willows and aspens and maples and evergreens, these are the real trees, right? And palms are false trees. Now how could we tell? Well, we would look at the evolutionary relationships. If you examine a cladogram or an evolutionary tree, you find different clades, and these are branches that include a common ancestor and all of its descendants. A clade, fitting that we're talking about trees, is like a stem, and all the branches above it are part of that clade as well. A different branch, even though it may have the same looking leaves, is not part of the same clade. Palm trees are part of the clade of plants known as monocots, and this includes grasses, corn, onions, celery, basically a lot of the stuff you find in the produce aisle at the grocery store. True trees, such as maples, oaks, and aspens, these are dicots, a different clade. So there it is, right? Palm trees don't have wood or branches and are monocots, and biologically speaking, they are not true trees. So is the problem solved? No. Behind me, I have oak trees and I have evergreen trees. And evergreen trees throw a wrench in everything. Pines, cedars, firs, all the evergreens, it turns out that these trees predate both monocots and dicots entirely. They form their own older branch on the tree of life. In fact, despite looking very similar, maples and pines are more distantly related to each other than maples and palms are. So this tree with a single trunk, true wood, lots of different branches, is more distantly related to this tree with a single trunk, true wood, and multiple branches than it is to a palm tree. But even the dicot trees aren't that closely related to each other. Maples, for example, they're more closely related to Brussels sprouts than they are to oak trees. And oaks are in the same clade as orchids. So if orchids and Brussels sprouts are in the same clade as what we call trees, then what the hell is a tree? The honest answer is, there's no such thing. Tree is what we call something that looks like something. Now you might be scoffing, you might be thinking that this is ridiculous, I can just call a tree whatever it is. And sure, but that's not scientific. It's the equivalent of saying a bat is a type of bird just because they can fly. They share that characteristic, so they're the same thing, right? Well, not scientifically. Yes, maples and pine trees, they have trunks and they have branches and they have wood, but those features evolved independently. They're convergent, not inherited from a common tree ancestor. Bats and birds, also, they share a very important trait, but they're part of different evolutionary lineages. The ability to fly is not what defines them, and the presence of trunks, branches, wood, all of that stuff, that doesn't really define what a tree is. Now you might still be thinking, come on, I know what a tree is. And sure, it feels obvious, right? But biology doesn't work that way, and our instincts are very often wrong. Science has done a great job of teaching us that. The world is more complicated than it looks. Insisting that we know something when the evidence says otherwise, it's not just incorrect, it holds us back from understanding things the way they truly are. Now, if you want to make sure that you have friends for the rest of your life, after watching this video, when somebody says the word tree, don't go, actually. Maybe your friends are like that, but read the room, people. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Be a subscriber if you're not already, and you'll see me tomorrow.